Shalom and welcome to Secrets Revealed, the Holy Bible. Today will be a start of, hopefully, I think something will be the beginning of something great. That's what I was trying to say. Not only is today a new moon, a new month, it's the first day of the 10th month, which is the one of the 4 days of remembrance, according to the book of Jubilees. These are scriptural days. They coincide with the flood. And so today is the first day of the 10th month. I believe it is when the tops of the mountains were first revealed. Once the waters started to subside, Noah was able to see the tops of the mountains for the first time. And that happened on this day, historically. So as you can see, the screen is much busier than normal. I've incorporated a few things. You have the Bible here. Obviously, it's the Exodus 35. Let me just make some room for that. Give me a moment to... Okay, so as I was saying, we have the magnifier up here. We have the video right there, and then you have the scriptures right in the middle, and that's magnified just so those people on your mobile devices can read it better. And then you have my research right here, just so I can read from it. And then at the very bottom, you have something that I noticed from a channel that I subscribe to. They use this and it was very, very helpful. So I hope this will be helpful to viewers. And I'm sure it will for me, just in terms of me wanting to go back and reviewing topics and seeing what I'm talking about. You don't even need timestamps. You just scroll through the video and you can see the very bottom, what am I even talking about? Okay, so this is going to be more quiet than normal because this is rather late. This video is recording this in the middle of the night, past midnight, so you have to just put up with my lower volume. Usually I talk a bit louder, so a little more reserved, or a little more anyway, not as bombastic as I usually am. So it's going to be a little more quiet in here. Exodus chapter 35 is what we're looking at today. There are 35 verses, very fitting. Beginning in verse 2, we'll look at that. It says, a holy Shabbat versus a holy day, a Shabbat of rest. Okay, so a rest of rest, because the word Shabbat means rest. So a rest of rest. It's kind of redundant in the Maz. So I'm going to just pause the video so I can change the topic. Okay, so this is going to be a little more time consuming than normal, but I think it's worth it just for that feature at the very bottom. You can see now the current topic is burning a fire on the Sabbath day, on the Shabbat. Is that okay? So verse 3 addresses this. Let's read it. You shall not burn a fire in any of your dwellings on the Sabbath day. I am Yah, according to the Septuagint. And then the Maz says, you shall kindle no fire throughout your habitations upon the Sabbath day. Okay, so that's what the text say. So to burn a fire, is this meant as do not burn a fire at all, period? Not just stop, full stop, no fire. For example, if you have a family that lights candles, a Sabbath candle, before the sun sets, can they let the candle continue to burn well into the Sabbath? Or is this speaking of don't burn a fire during the Sabbath? So between Friday sunset to the end of uh, Shabbat sunset. Is that what it's talking about? Now, there's a speculation on my part because I know, for example, you have the tabernacle, and in the tabernacle, you do have candles, specifically the candlestick, the menorah, as it's called, and that is lit perpetually. I don't think that's ever allowed to be extinguished. So, in that case, when were those candles lit? Well, not during the Sabbath, that's for sure. And then you have the account of a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath who was stoned to death. But we can also make the logical assumption, and this is dangerous, but he's probably gathering the sticks to do what? To make a fire, to burn a fire. So I'm leaning more towards it's the former that uh, that you can light a candle if that's your family's tradition or what have you, or if you just need to cook, you can kindle a fire, burn a fire before the Sabbath, but not on the Sabbath, as it explicitly says here on the Sabbath. Don't do it on the Sabbath day. I just want to remind here because I don't know if I was able to go through this, but let's look at this one more time. A holy Sabbath, a rest for Yah. So it does say in verse 2, the seventh day shall be rest, a holy rest, a rest for Yah. So we dedicate that rest to Him, and we rest for our bodies too, as opposed to the Maz, which says will be a holy day. Okay, a holy day. It's different than shall be rest, and then a Sabbath of rest. So you can see it separates holy and Sabbath in the Maz, whereas in the Sept it is holy. It's a holy rest, not just a holy day. It's a holy rest, a rest of rest to Yah. Well, that's just redundant, like I said. So that's all for verse 3. I'm going to pause it again and then change the title. Okay, so again, this is a little time consuming, but I think it's worth it since I don't even spend any time. I spend zero time to edit these videos. I just pause and resume recording. So that's how I do things around here. It's a lot more efficient, saves a lot of time. So next verse we're looking at is actually, I think it's still verse 3. It says here, I am Yah. That's omitted in the Maz. Interesting. Verse 6, we see here double and spun. The words double and spun have been omitted. Also hair. So if you're reading the Maz and you're a literalist, just take everything literally. You're going to say, hey, goats. We just put goats there. No, obviously, it's not that, but you can't just assume everyone's going to have common sense. So no, it is indeed goat's hair. Verse 7, skins blue, skins dyed blue versus badgers. That's a continuous difference. Incorruptible wood versus shittim wood. I think that is just a translation of shittim, which is incorruptible, but I could be wrong. Continuous difference. Last time I'll mention it. This difference for this book, you're going to see that quite often. Verse 8, the whole verse has been added, but it is included later in the Septuagint in verse 15. So let's look at that later. Verse 9, the whole verse is different. The whole verse um, is different as well. The sardine stones, um, or sardius, which is a blood red. It's a blood red colored gem. Versus an onyx, which is a black gemstone. So, yeah, verse 8 and verse 9. So, verse 8 in the sept and verse 9 correspond. That's the parallel. So, sardine stones is they're blood red. It's a sardius stone. Whereas the Maz says onyx, and we know that's black and not the same color at all. Verse 11, the chords. We see here the chords. Where's that? The chords versus the tent. That would be verse 10, actually, verse 10 in the sept. So the chords versus his tent. That's the difference there. The word boards has been added in the Maz, as well as sockets. Okay, so we're going to pause once more. Okay, so as you can see, I made a bit of a mistake there. The current topic is efficiency of words. Just ignore that little mistake there. So verse 13, let's look at this a bit closer. All its furniture, okay. Where is that mentioned? So it's using an efficiency of words in the sept right here, verse 15. The table and all its furniture. You can see that contrast between all the words being used in the Maz, where sept it just says all its furniture. That's all it has to say. Verse 14, we see the same thing as verse 13. It's more efficient. It doesn't leave anything out. It just doesn't repeat itself redundantly. There's no redundancies. Verse 15, it's added more items, specifically 3 items. And then verse 16 is the same as verse 13, all its furniture, once again. Verse 17, emerald stones versus sockets. Okay, I don't see it exactly here. Verse 18, the verse has been added, this verse here. But regarding the verse 17, emerald stones versus sockets, let me just look for sockets. Okay, here. The hangings of the court, his pillars and their sockets, and then word hanging was added. If we look right here, emerald stones. Okay. So 13 is the corresponding verse of 17, I think. See if I can confirm this. Just bear with me for a moment. I need to get a new mouse. I'm really having trouble with pausing. Okay, I want to keep it honest. I don't want to pretend that. Okay, so in regards to this verse, verse 17, I didn't really look at it slowly, but if you look very closely, I put here hanging ... So most of these words have been added to this verse. In verse 13, you can see very clearly the emerald stones, okay, versus sockets. That's the only time I see that there. So moving on, verse 18, this verse has been added. The pins of the tabernacle, that's not actually there. Then verse 19, the oil and incense was omitted from this verse. And these two words were omitted completely in the Mass. So the garments of priesthood for the sons of Aaron and the anointing oil and the compound incense, they're not found in 19 of the Mass. Verse 20 to 21, the heart and mind is different in expression terminology. Let me just pause one more time just to change the topic. Okay, so as I was saying, verse 20 and 21, the heart and mind are different in their expression and the way the terminology being used. So let's see, it says here, they whose heart prompted them, and they to whomsoever it seemed good in their mind, each an offering. It's a typo there. So the congregation of Israel went out from Moses, and they brought what is whose heart prompted them, versus in the Mass, everyone whose heart stirred them up, and everyone whom his spirit made willing. They brought Yah's offering to the work of the tabernacle. Okay, I can't find the mind here. Oh, here it is, verse 22. Heart again. All right, I don't see the. I don't know if I just can't see today what's going on here. Okay, let's look at this slowly. Verse 20, or is it 20 and 21? Okay. So, oh, right there. Okay. And they, to whomsoever it seemed good in their mind, each an offering. And everyone whom his spirit made willing. Okay, so the difference is spirit, mind versus spirit. So that's an interesting difference. I didn't even notice that initially. Heart, and I'll put spirit versus mind. So that was something I didn't even notice initially. It's a good thing I looked at that again. Verse 22, and the men brought from the women. So they brought from the women, the men did, seals and earrings in the sept. The Mass says they came, both men and women. So these are men who have bracelets and earrings. Why would they have these rings and tablets? No, they took their 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 wives' jewelry, necklaces, and accessories to be given, donated as gold offerings. And notice that necklaces and seals were omitted in the Mass. There's no necklaces or seals here. Okay, moving on to verse 23. I'm moving a little slower than normal just because there's a new format. This is a completely new world for me right now in some ways. So blue and red only. The rest have been added. Okay. I'm not sure what I meant by that, so let's look at it. And all as many as brought ornaments of gold to Yah, and with whomsoever fine linen was found, they brought skins dyed blue, and ram skins dyed red. Okay, and now look at the Mass. Every man with whom was found blue, and purple, and scarlet. Okay, so all of these words have been added, except blue and red. So purple, fine linen, sorry, fine linen was there. Goats, I guess, would be one of the skins, but they inserted goats. It doesn't say goats there, um, unless they meant rams, so that could be interchangeable. Red skins of rams, okay, so that is the red skins, ram skins dyed red. Sounds like a tongue twister. And badger skins, so the skins dyed blue. So everything else was added. Verse 24, works of the preparation. Okay. Everyone that offered an offering brought silver and brass, the offerings to Yah, and they with whom was found incorruptible wood, and they brought offerings for all the works of the preparation. Verses for any work of the service. So that's different. Why is that different? And why is this significant? Because this is the offerings brought to do the work of preparing the tabernacle, to prepare the materials for it to be constructed. But when you read the Mass, it looks like, okay, this is just for the work of the service or the ministration. It's not specifying the construction of the tabernacle. It's talking about what the priest would be doing. That's one way to understand it, but it leaves it kind of open and vague. Or maybe it's not even vague, it's just a whole different domain. It's not preparation of the tabernacle, it's just the service and whatever that could mean. All right, so moving on, verse 27, emerald versus onyx. Okay. Oracle versus breastplate. So those words are different, but they could very well just be the same thing in terms of appearance, but they do call it an oracle in the sept. Verse 28 is different, so let's look at this. The compounds, both for the anointing oil and the composition of the incense. Okay, I have to remember to read it in the magnifier because sometimes I'm not looking at the top. Some people may, due to visual impairment, will want to read the magnifier, so let's read that. And spice and oil for the light. Okay, not the same at all. It added spice and oil for the light, not anointing oil. So that was an insertion there. And then it does mention, okay, and for the anointing oil, fair enough, it says that. And for the sweet incense. So the incense was a good smelling incense. But it says the composition of the incense just isn't the same terminology used. Verse 29 is different as well. And every man and woman whose mind inclined them to come in and do all the works, as many as Yah appointed them to do by Moses. I'll stop there. Excuse me. The children of Israel, instead of man and woman, brought a willing offering to Yah. So instead of mind inclined them, although, yeah, it does somewhat imply that, okay, or infer that they chose to do it. No one forced them to. It wasn't commanded. It just, they were moved to do it. Every man and woman. Okay, so it seems that that was inserted. The first part of the verse was inserted. Whose heart made them willing to bring for all manner of work, which Yah had commanded to be made by the hand of Moses. So notice they used the word heart. In the sept, it is mind. The children of Israel, brought an offering to Yah. Okay, so I wouldn't say they're wildly different. I noticed that the last part of the verse was simply moved to the beginning in the Mass, so I wouldn't say it's wildly different. And then moving to verse 31, and I have to pause just to change the title. Let's do that. Okay, so continuing on in verse 31, speaking of Bezaleel, the son of Urias, the son of Or of the tribe of Judah, Elohim has filled him, rather, with a divine spirit of wisdom and understanding, and get this, and knowledge of all things. That's their title, their topic of discussion. The Mass says he has filled him with the spirit of Elohim uh, in wisdom and understanding, and in knowledge, comma, and in all manner of workmanship. A little more specific in the Mass. So perhaps the Mass makes more sense in this case because when we think about it and you reflect on King Solomon, who was the wisest man on the face of the earth, who ever lived. But perhaps the verse is self-explanatory because maybe he did have knowledge of all things, just not to the level of Solomon, because Solomon wasn't even born yet, as we know. So let's move on. Verse 32, to labor skillfully. So this is the knowledge he was given, knowledge of all things, specifically to labor skillfully in all works. Let me just look at that again. In all works of cunning workmanship, to form the gold and the silver and the brass. So that's verse 32. And the Mass to devise curious works, instead of cunning workmanship, to work in gold and in silver and in brass. Okay. So these verses describe what verse 31 was alluding to in the sept. So let's look at 33 now. To work in stone, to fashion the wood, to work in every work of wisdom, versus the cutting of stones, carving of wood, and to make any manner of cunning work. So that's what it was speaking of, knowledge of all things, to labor skillful. So that's what it was describing in verse 31. Not that he was, King Solomon level, knows everything about everything. No, it's talking about workmanship, and that's why I think the Mass is makes more sense. But again, these verse breaks were man created by man. They didn't exist in the original text, and there weren't any punctuation marks either. So you can even say a divine spirit of wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And then you could say of all things to labor skillfully. So these three, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, could be very well tied into all of this. The skillful works of cunning workmanship and all these materials. Okay. And then the last verse we're going to look at, I feel like this has been a long video, but just because I'm adjusting to my new setup here, which I'm very happy about, very excited about, and I just decided to record today on the spur of the moment to test this out. So I hope this has been helpful. And the last verse we're looking at now is to close out the video is verse 34. It says here, and Elohim gave improvement in understanding both to him, Bezaleel, and to Eliab, the son of Achisamach of the tribe of Dan, verses he has put in his heart, talking about Elohim, that he may teach, it's talking about Bezaleel, both he, because that word isn't actually there, he and Aholiab, the son of Ahisamach of the tribe of Dan. So you can see a bit of not a small difference, it's rather significant difference, that he didn't teach anybody. He just had an improvement on understanding. So whatever he had before, and he probably was skilled before, but he was given on top of that an additional level of wisdom, understanding, and as you can see, knowledge as well. So he didn't teach as the masses erroneously saying. And so let's continue 35, even though I didn't note that. So Elohim filled them. He filled them with wisdom, understanding, and perception versus wisdom of heart. So you can see perception was not even mentioned. So I'm going to add that there. Perception was omitted. So 35, omit perception. Sometimes, I guess, just due to human errors, we sometimes do not catch everything, although I do my best to find everything. So that word was definitely was omitted. Also, understanding was as well. But it says wisdom, wisdom, understanding, perception. So I'm going to type that as well. Oh, my computer would just not act up a little bit there. Understanding. Okay, let's put that down. So as you can see, this is on the fly, right there before your eyes. To understand, to work all the works of the sanctuary. So again, that was omitted as well. To understand, to work. So it's one thing to work, but it's another thing to understand, to work, to know what you're doing, understanding the ins and outs. It's one thing to know the mechanics of something, but it's another thing to know why you're doing it and the rationale behind it. And so I think that's the level that these two men were at, that they understood this work very intimately. And this was a divine gift given to them from our Father, the Creator. Works of the sanctuary, to weave the woven and embroidered work. Okay, so that's that is there as well, although it does say weave the woven versus cunning workman, but that is a constant, continuous difference. Fine linen, scarlet, no problem there. To do all work of curious workmanship. So curious workmanship is the way the Sept describes it. The Maz uses the terms cunning workman, and it says that again at the end, devise cunning work, regarding the workmanship and embroidery. Okay, so that's all for this video. Thank you very much for your time. May Yah bless you and you make your way prosperous for secrets revealed, the Holy Bible. This is Jack Knight signing off. Till next time, shalom. I really need a new mouse. It is a little, it's very time consuming.